Sick and alone in a foreign country, what are you gonna do? Hey there, so I'm Jeff, Not Dead Yet Adventures is the channel, and I am sick, I'm alone, and I'm in a foreign country. May not sound like it, may not look like it, but I'm running a bit of a fever, got some congestion, and I'm gonna be coughing a lot as I make this video. I need to pack up and move. I need to change hotels, and there's nothing I can do about it. I gotta go. I want to crawl back in bed or jump in the shower and just stand there for hours, but I can't because I'm sick, alone, and I have a schedule. So I'm going to rant on about this, and while I pack, my stuff's a mess, but I'll let you look out at the beautiful city here while I ramble on with my microphone and talk about being sick and alone. I think you can kind of see out the window, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, let me get a pole on here so it looks a little better. Or maybe, you know what? I'll bet this window is a better view. I don't know. I don't know what you want to look at. Probably don't want to look at me. Probably don't want to look at the wall. Yeah, this isn't so bad, and there's some shade there. So we'll do that, and hopefully the video will come out okay. So sick and alone in a foreign country, what are you going to do? I wanted to make this video like a year ago. In fact, it was almost exactly a year ago. I was here in Kuala Lumpur, and I was way more sick than I am now. Way more sick. But I've been traveling for 3.5 years. I've been sick on the road quite a bit by myself with no help, no assistance, and you have to have a plan. You have to know what you're doing. When you go to the hospital, when you ignore it, when you get some medicine, do you get the right medicine? So I'm going to tell a couple stories about people I have witnessed and watched do the right thing, do the wrong thing, and then I'm going to tell you what I do. So if you want to listen to me ramble on about that with my experience, thank you. If not, I understand. Have a great day, and maybe come back tomorrow or next week or whenever I put out another video. So the first story I want to tell was about a gentleman in the Philippines. He was a YouTuber. He took the channel down, and actually I think he's no longer vertical. I think he took the dirt nap. But regardless, he was sick, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go buy some antibiotics, because antibiotics you can just go buy in some countries, not a problem. So he went and bought some antibiotics, and he took the antibiotics, and he got worse and worse and worse. And he told the story on his channel. Like I said, he made a video about this, and then he got embarrassed or whatever and took the video down. So, but it was a great video, right? Because, and it's a shame he took it down, but basically what he did is he got the wrong antibiotics for his type of sickness. So he was self-medicating with antibiotics, and the antibiotics he was taking, antibiotics aren't the best thing in the world for you. They kind of trash your stomach and do a bunch of other things, right? You want to take antibiotics with you want to be very careful, and you want to talk to a doctor, right? But he didn't, and so he just went and got whatever he thought was good, and it made him worse. It made him worse to the point where he was almost hospitalized, according to his own words. He was almost hospitalized and scolded by the doctor. The doctor gave him the right antibiotics, and obviously he ended up okay from that episode. But it wasn't the smartest thing in the world, right? I think we can all agree on that. It's not the smartest thing in the world to think you're a doctor and just go get antibiotics, because they're all the same, which they're not, right? Any adult knows this, right? And so, lo and behold, he ended up in the hospital, or almost in the hospital, saw the doctor, and got straightened out. But just think about it, like, if he didn't respond or react, it could have gone horribly sideways, right? It could have gone just horribly sideways. So the other story I want to tell, there's actually two more I want to tell. The other story I want to tell is I get a phone call from a friend, smart guy, pretty experienced medically, and he's having a little bit of gastro problems, a little stomach pain, could be a little traveler's revenge. He's on the road, he's traveling for work, he's in a foreign country, and he's not feeling so good. And he's kind of like, let me call some people and see what they think. Because he didn't really want to deal with going to the hospital in a foreign country. Didn't really know where to turn. So, my advice to him was, you're an adult, you've traveled quite a bit. If it doesn't seem right, go get it checked out. There's no reason not to, right? If it doesn't seem right, if it's not familiar, go get it checked out. Because, he's traveled pretty extensively. He's not a spring chicken. Well, he is a bit of a spring chicken, but he's traveled. He's had traveler's revenge. He's had, Montezuma's revenge or whatever. And, he knows what it's like to get sick. And most of us do know what it's like to get sick, right? We've all been sick before. We're all going to be sick again. And, it's just part of life, right? So he's still not too sure about it. He calls a half dozen people, and he finally goes to the hospital, and ends up he has appendicitis. So since he got to the hospital soon enough, right, since he responded quickly and got to the hospital soon enough, they were able to give him some antibiotics. And, 3-5 days later, he's all fine, went about his routine, and then a few years later, prophylactically had his appendix removed, because if you get appendicitis once and they treat it that way, chances are it's going to come back. So the smart thing to do is, at your time and choosing, go get it taken out. But here's the kicker, right? Had he tried to just cowboy through it, had he tried to just muscle through it, that could have ended horribly wrong. What if he went to bed, woke up, and that sucker popped, right? That would not be good. That would not be good at all. And, it's definitely a life-threatening issue. So by knowing that it wasn't the same, it was a little different, right? And not being confident, and I'm not saying confidence is good or bad, right? Confidence can be good and bad. But knowing that, hey, I need to go check this. I need to have this evaluated. I need to look at this because something's different. I'm not going to say it saved his life, but sure saved him a whole headache, whole long issues, right? Saved him a hospital stay. Even if they go in or with the little cameras, the little things, right? It's still, a big deal. Especially when you're in like I said, a foreign country with no one there to help you, no one there, but just by going in, he was able to get the antibiotics, get it treated. So another story that crossed my path on the internet was a guy who got an infection, and this was told third hand, so it may just be BS, but it's pretty spot on for what could really happen. So I think the story is worth retelling, even if it was just a BS story that somebody passed on. But a guy again in the Philippines, there's a lot of these Philippine vloggers. So a friend of a friend of a friend or whatever, was riding a scooter in the muddy rainwater and got a cut, and it got infected when he stepped in the little muddy flood water. And he never really did anything about it. The infection kept growing, getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, he went septic and he's no longer vertical. He took the dirt nap, just because he didn't want to go to the doctor and get an infection treated. Now, some infections, obviously we all know nowadays, some infections, even if you get them treated, you're still going to end up taking a dirt nap. But chances are, if you go get it treated, at the appropriate time, your chance of survival goes way up, way up. And I think that's all any of us ever really want is, the best chance of survival. I'm not looking for any guarantees, but I'm not going to go out of my way to increase the likelihood that I'm going to win that race to the dirt nap, right? It's not a race I want to win. I will more than happily concede that race to you. You can win that race all day, every day. And, I'm not going to bend over backwards trying to win that race, right? I'm not going to make any extra efforts to try and win that race. So, a little thing in America, like a little infection, seems like nothing. But when you're in a foreign country, there's other pathogens or whatever. I don't know the words, right? I'm not that smart. But there's other bugs, other germs, other things that your body's not used to, you didn't grow up with. Even a little infection can be a big deal. I watch people in other countries, they just, grab stuff and eat it with their dirty hands. And that's fine because they're used to it. Or if you or I or anybody from Western civilization were to do that, because we've grown up in a different environment, that's going to make us sick. And not the fun kind of sick, right? It's going to be sitting on a toilet for hours sick. And do you want to intentionally put yourself in that situation? No. So when you get a cut and it's infected, you need to respond quickly and you need to respond, smartly. I got a cut in Albania on my hand and, immediately, I'm not waiting till tomorrow to go get some triple antibiotic. And where I was in a little city in Albania, and even finding something like Neosporin was, a challenge. So I finally got the equivalent of Neosporin, got it on my cut, and I monitored it for 3 or 4 times a day for 3 or 4 days because I knew the increased risk, the added risk, one of my lifestyle and 2 of where I was at, that I don't want any problems and I don't want to lose a finger over something stupid. And sure, it sounds like hyperbole, it sounds like this, sounds like over drama, But why take the risk? Why take the risk? I'm not saying don't be, don't go do fun things. I'm just saying when you do get a cut or something like that, why go out of your way to increase your chances of it going sideways or going, ending negatively? There's no good reason to do that. There's no good reason to increase your chances of having a problem, is my opinion. My opinion. Okay, so those are my stories. Those are the background. So what happened with me a year ago is I got sick twice, actually. I got what I think was a mild case of dengue fever. It's pretty common in Malaysia. There's like 6 or 7 kinds of dengue fever, as I understand it. And, I got sick for about a week. Never really got extreme, but I had all the little symptoms. And so I monitored it closely. My fever never got high. My fever never got high. None of the symptoms ever got extreme. And I knew as soon as it did, I was going to the doctor. No questions asked, right? Now, if it's just a small flu or something, I don't need to go see a doctor every time. That's me personally. I'm not saying that's the smartest thing in the world. I'm just telling you, my level of risk, that's where I stand. Is if I'm familiar with being sick at that level and I'm used to it, I'm not going. But the second it crosses a threshold, a barrier, or whatever you want to say, I'm doing whatever I can to get in front of a doctor. So like right now, I have an upper respiratory infection. It sank into my lungs yesterday, got a fever, and I'll probably have walking pneumonia in a week. How do I know this? Because it's happened so many times. I got a really bad case of walking pneumonia a few years ago, 10 years, 12 years ago, I don't know, a lot of years ago. And ever since then, I'm far more susceptible to walking pneumonia. It's just the way it is, right? It's just the way it is. So they have a vaccine, but I'm not really into doing the whole vaccine thing. But there's a lot of other options. The best option for me is just knowing that this is an issue for me and being able to respond to it. But this brings up, I'm alone. So when I'm sick, I still have to function. I still have to get out of bed. I still have to go find food. I still have to go do this. I still have to go do that. And like today, I still have to, as horrible as I feel, I still have to go change hotels. Right? And I'm not telling you any of this because I want any sympathy or anything. I'm not looking for any of that. My whole point of making this video is to get you to think about this if you're going to be a single traveler. I recently met up with LJ and Russell from, Retired to Rome. See, my brain's fried right now. And, they were asking, about the challenges of being single versus, traveling as a couple. My opinions on it. And this is one of those things, right? Usually, in my experience, couples, they usually get sick at different rates, right? Or one will get sick, then the other will get sick, and there'll be some overlap. But usually, couples, from what I've seen, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but my perception is, in the past, I've seen, a wife will be sick and then a husband will be sick, or vice versa. And it's usually not the same time, right? I mean, it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't, but that's my perception of reality. So if one or two of you are, if one or the other is sick, or if two of you are sick, it's still easier to get around. But, when you're trying to decide which end to put on the toilet, and there's no one there to help you, it can get a little sticky, right? When you've got stuff coming out both ends at high velocity, trying to be as PC as I can, what are you going to do? And that happens, right? If you're out eating, and it happens to me, I like to eat a lot of different street foods. I like to try them. So, I'll get a little stomach issue here and there all the time. It's not a problem for me. It's like I'm used to it, right? But, what happens when that little stomach issue is more than just a little stomach issue, and now, it's coming out both ends? What do? Are you going to be able to get to the doctor? Are you going to be able to find medical care? Are you, what is your plan? And that's the whole point of this is, what is your plan? Do you feel confident knowing, if you've got a little stomach issue, or if you need to go to the doctor and get it checked out? Where's your level of comfortability in these types of matters? Are you comfortable, getting on a plane, going someplace with no medical care available? Or no friends, or no family, or, I was on an island in the Philippines, and I trashed my knee. I really badly trashed my knee. And, people would help me limp along, but, getting to, the boat tour wasn't going to cut the boat tour short because of me. They looked at me and they're like, oh, you're fine, right? And, they're not going to, ruin 40 other people's vacation you know, unless I was bleeding or dying, you know, and as far as they could tell, I couldn't stand up, right? And you know, and honestly, you know, at that time and point, they didn't care too much, and you know, I was just like, what do I do, right? Then I get back to the hotel, you know, I get to the dock, I'm kind of limping around, figure out how to stand up a little bit. I get to the dock, and you know, I'm trying to figure out how to get to the doctor, and somebody, you know, puts me on a trike, and they get me to the doctor, and then I'm like, okay, now what do I do? You know, and then I get another trike to the hotel. Now I'm in the hotel, I've got no food, I've got nothing. I can't get anybody at the hotel to go buy me food. They were too embarrassed, too shy. And I'm like, you know, just anything, right? And you know, and I'm offering to pay them significant sums of money, and they're not, you know, biting. They're just, I don't know. But again, you know, put yourself in that situation. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? How are you going to respond? And, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the doctor and get some medicine? Are you going to go to the pharmacy and buy some antibiotics? You know, none of that sounds like a good plan unless you know what you're doing. And chances of you having gone to med school and know what you're doing, pretty slim, right? Like, doctors aren't the most common thing in the world. And if you're a doctor, kudos to you. Maybe, you know, you can do a better job of this video. But again, you know, my whole thing is, you know, what's your plan? What is your plan? You know, I've got emergency plans that I don't like to think about, but I've thought about it, right? And I know that, you know, I can cowboy up and, you know, muscle through a lot. Why? Because I've had to. Because I've created this situation where I have to, right? I created a situation where I'm out here by myself, and if I get sick, you know, even though I've got the aircon on max, it's like 16 degrees in here, I'm still sweating, right? Why? Because I have a fever. I know I have a fever. Do I need medicine for it? Not yet, right? Do I need to see a doctor? Not yet. Will I go to the doctor as soon as it reaches that point? Of course I will. But right now, you know, this is where it's at. And, you know, fortunately, I'm pretty confident with, you know, knowing what's going on with me. So I'll go get some medicine. I'll go get the same prescription I've had, you know, 30 times, 20 times. Actually, probably 10 or 15 times. In reality, probably close to 10 to 15. And if it doesn't work immediately, because it always works immediately, if it doesn't work immediately, then I'm headed to the doctor, right? And I'm going to do that before it gets critical, because I know where this is going. I've been through this a million times, or 10 or 15 times, right? Been through this enough to know. And that's kind of one of the benefits of being old, is I've been sick a lot. Not like overly sick, not like crazy sick, but you know, you get colds, you get fevers, you get the flu, right? And those are things that you get accustomed to how they go, right? It's like watching a plant in your yard grow and die every year, right? The dandelions grow, they flower, they drop seeds, you know, every year, same thing, right? So, you know, how comfortable are you with all of this? In an old video, like 3 years ago, I made a video and I was talking about, you know, there's a couple books I would recommend reading before you went nomad. And one of them is any book on wilderness medicine. Wilderness medicine books, I think, are the best. First aid books, you know, I took first aid in like 5th grade. And the funny thing is, you know, that was mid 80s, right? So in 2000, I don't remember, 2006 or 7 or something, going through some medical training with the military, and they're trying to teach me the same first aid I learned in 5th grade. How to splint a fracture, right? 2 ties, all that. It's just the silliest thing, right? And there's this RN, just a bitchy RN, teaching the course, and she was wrong. She was dead wrong. And I could go all the way back to my 5th grade teacher who taught us first aid, and it hasn't changed in decades. And she was telling us to do stupid things, and I'm just like, you know, and she was wrong, and I called her out on it. She got really mad, this major, captain, I don't know. She was, ugh. I'm an RN. Okay, well, your RN doesn't know 5th grade first aid. And so, and you know, and then it got down to, I was disrespecting her, and I'm like, no, I was correcting her because she's teaching all the people I'm going to be out there with who, if I break a leg, they're going to, you know, fuck up my leg. So in comes, you know, all these high-ranking people, and I got yelled at. And in the end, they said, okay, you're right, but keep your mouth shut. You know, and they removed her from teaching the rest of our course. But it just, you know, first aid books are good. First aid books are, you know, useful. But if you don't know first aid by the time you're traveling as a nomad, well, you've had an interesting sheltered life. But the wilderness medicine books, they take it to another level, right? The wilderness medicine books, I haven't read one in probably 10 years. I've read 2 or 3, and they're all really great books and really worth your time if you're going to go nomad. Even just buy one, throw it in your bag, and I know it's a book, but throw the book in your bag because you can use it as a reference and go back and forth. And I'm not going to make any specific recommendations because, you know, I read a bunch and they were all good. Find one with good reviews. Find one, well, nobody goes to bookstores anymore, but I always like going into bookstores and like read 5 or 6 pages in the middle of the book and see if it flowed with me. If it didn't flow with me, I'd pick another book, right? But a wilderness first aid book, you know, it covers a lot of what to do when no one's around. And that's an important thing because when you're, you know, out, even in this big city, right? I don't know how to dial an ambulance, right? I don't know how to get to a hospital. I don't even know how to search for a hospital, right? Or a clinic. Do you go to a hospital or a clinic, or, you know, where do you go? You know, and this is a big, beautiful, modern city, but that's all things, you know, I'll be in a different city next week or next month, or, you know, and those are all details I don't bother to look up every time I change location because it's just, you know, too much, right? It's just too much. I don't need to be that paranoid because I know. Okay, so little camera drama there. The SD card was full, but I was talking about, you know, wilderness first aid in cities and how, you know, it's good to be a little paranoid, but if you're tracking down like all the emergency stuff every time you're in a new city, you know, if I were living there for months, that would be a great thing to do, but I'm not living there for months, right? I'm usually in and out of a city in a couple weeks, maybe a month, and I don't need to be that paranoid. I just don't. It doesn't strike me as useful behavior. So the other book, this is kind of off topic for this video, but the other book I would say, find the oldest version of The Ultralight Backpacker by Ray Jardine. The Ultralight Backpacker by Ray Jardine. The funny thing is LJ and Russell from Retired to Roam, they could totally write that book just by how they travel. And, you know, they are truly lightweight, you know, world travelers, world nomads. Boy, they humble me because I carry a big bag and then I add another bag sometimes. And, you know, I carry a bunch of stuff I don't actually like need all the time, but they do it right. And they travel on such a small budget for a couple. It's unbelievable. So Retired to Roam, go check them out. But The Ultralight Backpacker by Ray Jardine was one of those life-changing books for me. I was into backpacking and, you know, you're listening to all this. And I remember one of the lessons he teaches is these people are so worried about like cutting the handle off their toothbrush and taking the tongue out of their shoes and all these things. And he's like, you're saving, you know, a fraction of an ounce. He's like, I just do away with whole big heavy things. You know, I don't need, you know, this, or I don't need a sleeping bag, or I don't need, you know, he was talking about core big changes, right? When all these people are, you know, hyper focused on the little trivial, you know, half an ounce here, you know, quarter of an ounce there, you know, and he was like, wear tennis shoes, not boots, right? Things like that, make big changes, right? You can take a pound off your feet and you're doing, you know, 40, 50,000 steps a day. That pound, you know, adds up, right? So anyway, I think I've had a long rant. Definitely feeling a little bit better, but the fever's definitely set in. Starting to get that headache going too. But I need to check out. I need to move. Thankfully, I don't have the squirts. Thankfully, I'm not vomiting. But, you know, what would you do in situations like that if, you know, today I was vomiting, right? How would you handle it? How, you know, if you're sitting there throwing up, you know, and you have to check out of this hotel, you know, what would you do? And, you know, are you okay being stuck in a hotel, you know, puking your guts out? You know, how would you handle that? These are all important questions to ask when you're thinking about going on the road, because it happens, right? It happens. And if you're not prepared to deal with it, it could go really sideways, you know, it could go really, really sideways. And I'm not going to get into all the fear mongering about that, but, you know, just think about it. Think about what are you going to do when you're sick and alone in a foreign country, in a foreign city, and you've got to get on a plane, or you've got to go here, or you've got to go there, right? You've got travel plans that can't be adjusted or ignored. Or, you know, what if you're got to get out of the country because of your visa, right? What if you've got to leave tomorrow because your visa expires and you'll be an overstay? You know, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? Just have that in the back of your mind, right? Have a plan, have an idea of what you'll do, what steps you'll take. And I'm going to finish packing up. I've got a little bit more to throw in the bag. Got this North Face. Not a super big fan of this North Face bag, I will say. You know, it looks great, it sounds great, feels great, but in practical use, you know, I'm going to wait until I get both my bags side by side. But I think the Osprey is winning so far. I think the Osprey is winning so far. So, hopefully I said it enough where you heard it, and I doubt anybody will listen to the end, but have a plan, think about it. Wilderness medicine book, get one, read it, carry it with you. Refer to it often until you're familiar with all of it. And Ultralight Backpacker is a great book. If you don't have time for the book, just watch Retired to Roam and ask them a lot of questions about how they travel, how they pack, and how they navigate, because they're living that book. They just don't know it. Or maybe they do. I don't know. But hopefully I'll see them again soon, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.